Have you ever had a dirty keyboard? Well, this one looks very nice and clean, doesn't it? Would you believe it if I told you we just cleaned it? Well, we did. And I want to show you how. So the first thing you need to do is find a dirty keyboard, and this keyboard is dirty. The second thing you need to do is you need to have some kind of a bin that you can put it into that's big enough to fit the dimensions of your keyboard. Now, there are some keyboards that you probably cannot do this way, but most keyboards are of this variety and you can do it this way. As long as you follow my instructions, you'll be fine. Okay, so you take it and you put it into a bin, and then you add some water. Warm water is better than cold, but hey, you can use cold water too. You just keep on pouring it in there until, I'm gonna make it even stronger, until your keyboard is fully covered. And if you don't have a sprayer, that's fine. You can use whatever you need to get the water into the container. This one wasn't even as dirty as the other one. So, you're going to leave this. I'm going to shake it to get a lot of the bubbles out. You can even turn it over. It doesn't matter. And now you're just going to leave it to sit for, well, probably half an hour is good. You may see some hair and stuff come out, like here we've got some gunk that's come out of this one. You may see a lot depending on what you've done to your keyboard. Oh, and by the way, if you pour something accidentally or on purpose, I don't know why you do it on purpose, but if you spill something onto your keyboard, the first thing you should do is unplug it. The second thing you should do is follow my instructions to save it. All right, so once this has soaked for long enough, the next step will be to open it up. After, say half an hour to an hour perhaps, you can take it out of the water, let it drain, discard the water, and then you're just going to want to let it sit to try and get as much of the water to drain out as you can. Changing the positioning, do it like this and like this. Make sure to shake it really good because some of the water will be trapped in the keycaps. And you can do that when you're still over the bin instead of over your carpet or whatever. Now, once you have it mostly drained, you need a screwdriver because you're going to remove all of the screws. Now, some of these screws may not actually need to be removed, but if you've never opened this before, it's going to be hard to know which ones to remove. So I suggest starting with the ones on the outside and pay attention to whether or not they're all the same length. If they are not all the same length, then you're going to have to put them down in the same pattern as the keyboard so that when you put them back in, it won't cause something to be broken. It's not going to be the end of the world if you break a post or something like that, but it's better not to, of course. I'm just going to try the outside ones first because the inside ones may be holding something else in place rather than holding together the two sides of the casing. And so far, they're all the same length and size in terms of the head, so that's good. Please don't leave the keyboard in the water for too long because you never know if perhaps they have used parts that are prone to rusting. There. So let's see if that's enough. Now it's possible that there are snaps around the edges that hold it together, but it looks like from the way this is resisting me that I do have to remove the middle ones. Not all keyboards have this many. Some keyboards have maybe half of this. Much easier if you use a magnetized screwdriver, but use what you've got. Just make sure it's the right size. There we go. Now this happens to have multiple layers. So what you're going to want to do is, if you have somewhere that's warm, it's a good idea to put it there, like on top of a refrigerator if you've got lots of space on top of the fridge. Fridges typically are warm up there, so that'll help it to dry out faster. You can tap off as much of the water as you can to help speed up the process. And then you have to look at this part of it and see whether or not there's more disassembly required. Now this has got several layers, so we're gonna, oops. And this is a membrane keyboard. This keeps food and water and stuff, theoretically at least, from penetrating into the sensitive part of it. And it's important to make sure that you put this back. Otherwise, if you do not put it back here, it may become a big problem, because it also serves for the buttons. So you'd want to make sure to put it all back in correctly, like that. But right now, our goal is to disassemble. And if you can just take this off and give it a good shake, and set it aside too, then you're just left with, make sure if you have the printed circuit board like this in your keyboard, be careful. This is not something that is very strong, so if you are not careful, you're going to damage it. You'll want to find a way to separate the layers a bit. So if you can maybe take some tissue or paper towel or something and put it between the layers temporarily, and don't let them sit there for too long, because they may become very attached as everything dries out. If you want to, you can actually disconnect this and this, but the only challenge there is you're going to have to remember how to make sure that this all comes back together correctly. Because if you put these layers in the wrong order, well, the keyboard isn't going to function correctly anymore. And of course, there's always the risk of ripping this. And we don't want that. So we're going to take care of that now. And you're going to want to leave this, it's going to take days. I mean, I suppose you could put a hair dryer or something on low power and use that to try and speed up the process, but you really, really, really have to make sure there's absolutely no water left anywhere in the keyboard. You don't want it dripping onto the keyboard and frying something, and that is a definite risk. So I'm going to get a paper towel. And this is actually more difficult to clean than the one that I showed you at the start of the video. That one is a very easy one to deal with. This one is complex with all these layers of plastic. Just be very, very, very careful, or you'll end up buying a new keyboard. I'm not getting all of them. There's still some that are stuck between these two top sheets. So I'm going to take some like this to leave a gap for air to help evaporate the water in between the two layers. And that will help. And then I'll get down here. I'm going to do the same thing again. There are some possible situations in which you would need to use a mild detergent or soap, like if you've spilled oil in this, or something that's got a lot of fat, that may necessitate more extreme actions. But the easiest thing to do to help preventing any serious damage to your keyboard is to buy a membrane keyboard or buying a membrane that covers the keycaps in case you want kind of a more of a manual type keyboard, like with cherry switches or something like that. That's going to require a membrane that sits on top, and those are made of silicone. They're very durable, they last a long time, and they're waterproof, obviously, so unless you tear them, they're going to do a great job. But once it's torn, unless you can fix it with silicone, you're going to have to replace it. They aren't that expensive, so if you're not getting a membrane keyboard, get a membrane to put on top of the keyboard to protect it. That's the best option, actually. It's better to have the membrane on top. The only problem is in terms of tactile, in terms of feel, you may find you have to adjust to that being a barrier there. So we will continue, but basically it's a matter of waiting, and we will continue in the next part of the video. But basically, once it's dried and you can shake it and stuff, and you're not seeing any water coming out, and you don't see any water pooled in the keycaps or anything like that, then you know you're done and you can reassemble it. Okay, so now that it's all dried out, don't forget to do what doctors sometimes forget. Take your instruments out of the keyboard, because you don't want to leave that in there and put it all back together and then your keyboard's not working and you're like, what the heck is going on? And gets all stressed out by it, do you? And then now, every keyboard is different. This is a more complicated one because it has these sheets, but if you're careful, you can do it. You just have to make sure that everything is where it's supposed to be before you start putting everything else together. This is where it gets a little bit difficult. Now the hard part is to get this back underneath the sheets, because, well, there are these parts of the sheets that are up here at the top that are held in place with screws, and if you don't be very careful, like I'm trying to be, then you'll end up ripping the sheet. But you also have to make sure that everything is aligned correctly with all the little posts and stuff here. Otherwise, you'll be coming back in here to redo it. Which, better to avoid having to redo it. And by the way, because the keys are on my legs, they are pushing up against this somewhat. So that can be a minor inconvenience. The alternative is to remove these 4 screws, lift up the layers, lay out the silicone, put the layers back on, screw it back in. But I've done it that way too. You can do it that way. It's just a little bit stressful for some people. Okay. The fact that the sides are coming together and clicking into place is a good sign. So now we just have to screw it together. So what I want you to do is, looking at the pattern of the screws, start with corners, screw each corner part way, and then once you've got all the corners partially secured, you're going to take one more screw and you're going to put it in the middle somewhere. Please be patient. When you have something that's as complex as this particular keyboard, if you don't wait long enough for all the water to evaporate, it can be disastrous. You can end up frying your keyboard, which, if you really like that keyboard, that's a really sad thing. So we're going to plug this in and see if it works before I add in all of the other things. And my volume control works, and that works. Let's try using the numeric keypad. Yep, that works. And then we'll try the others. And that's working. So the last thing to check would be yep, that seems to be working very well too. So it seems like we have succeeded in reconnecting this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to disconnect this, and I'm going to finish screwing in all the rest of the bolts in this thing, and then it's done and it's ready to be used again. If you look at it, and you'll notice this one is not fully clean. My goal was to get rid of all the junk that was making the keyboard not work right. And so, as we've seen, it does work right. But if you are very nitpicky and really want it to be clean, what I'd suggest you do is when you've let it soak, before you drain it, take a toothbrush or something similar that's not too coarse and run it between all the keycaps. Now, with some keycaps, you can take a keycap puller or use another tool to pull the keycaps off, and then you can clean them individually. But not all keyboards are easy to do that with. And some keyboards, the way they're designed, it's very hard to get it back together. I have succeeded sometimes and failed other times. So if you see like there are mechanical springs like on really big keys like this, and the shift keys and the enter and caps lock and backspace and tab, there tend to be a type of spring. It's more like a rod, but it is anchored at each end, and it helps the key to rebound back up. And those can be very, very finicky. I think the worst one I ever dealt with was on a keyboard for a laptop computer, and I never was able to get that one to come back together. It was the 0 on the numeric keypad, and gosh, I never was able to do it. I tried so many times. I had some other people try. It just didn't work. Unless you need to make it really, really clean, then you're done. I hope this has helped. If you would like to see this done with other kinds of keyboards, let me know in the comments. If you have any questions or suggestions or whatever, let me know those too. And I really appreciate you watching this. Please give it a thumbs up. And if you can share and subscribe and notifications on and all that kind of stuff, that'd be really helpful for me to build this channel. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Need to ask for your help. I'm sorry. On December 11th, 2024, Amazon terminated me and used false accusations against me. And on December 17th, I had my left shoulder operated on. I'm getting a lot better. I can do some things with my hand and my arm, but it's still pretty limited. If you could please help me out by liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting, and turning on notifications for my channels, that would really help. If you want to help me financially and you can afford to, you can go to my Glenn's Fast Reviews and you can do a super thanks as a donation there. If you want to donate on a monthly basis, you can become a member there. And or you can go to patreon.com/GLENNMII. So thank you for that. Also, I'd like to say thank you to bleepingcomputer.com for allowing me to post messages on their forum about my videos. Thank you so much. And don't forget to visit them. They offer a lot of wonderful resources for people who are using computers. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.